and welcome you all to In Conservation With. My name is David Lindo, and today is a great day because we have Tim Appleton with us. And Tim and I, we go back some time, don't we, Tim? You can talk.
We do indeed, David, yes. How far we better, may not need to tell everybody that.
Well, one thing I will say. One thing I will say about you, Tim, I've got to know you over the years, and I've really got to know you over the last maybe 2 years. We spent a bit of time together, was it last year in Brazil? And I began to realize, I realized just how much of a nice man you are. And you actually are, you have a lot of, you mean very well. And I really appreciated that since that time last year in Brazil when I spent time with you. So that's my tribute to you today.
Thank you, David. That's good words to hear, because that, they're few and far between. So I'll treasure that. And in fact, I think we're recording it, so I will hold you to that for some later date. But it's really good to be here this evening. From little Rutland in the centre of England. I hope everyone can hear me clearly. I gather there is some fuzzing going on, but I am still related closely to dinosaurs, and so my technical skills are somewhat restricted. So I hope everyone can hear. Welcome to everyone, and hopefully in the next hour you will learn a little bit more about my life in nature conservation. And please do ask any questions. I look forward to hearing from you all.
Good. Well, let's start at the very beginning, which is a very good place to start, apparently. A lot of my American friends, and I always say this, they always ask me, what was your spark moment? What was your spark? Did you have a spark bird, for example? Or how was your interest actually formed in the first place?
Well, bear in mind that I'm fairly ancient. So in the days of before the internet and before everyone was able to communicate around the world, one learned to appreciate and love wildlife. It was actually in your garden. Now, I come from the heart of Bristol, but right on the edge of a golf course, which is a wonderful place as a kid to play. I had the sort of parents who would let me sort of go out for the day almost, give you a box of matches, Tim, and come back later on. And, so I was always out in the field enjoying wildlife and just playing. And really, there was no real spark moment. It was just something that from the tiny age of about 5 or 6 that I realized that, wildlife was what I wanted to do. Wildlife was where I would go, I hope. But of course, all those years ago, in the sort of 60s and late 60s, to actually enter a career was pretty unusual, pretty unique. So I was very lucky to have a small wildlife park. It's quite a common thing in the sort of 60s to have these British wildlife parks all over the country. And there was one just on the edge of Bristol. And I used to go down there, volunteer, and I reared badgers and I reared fox cubs. So I did all sorts of things. My first television appearance was actually on Johnny Morris's Animal Magic. And I had 3 baby badgers that I was rearing. And so, in those good old days of black and white television. So it wasn't one particular spark moment. It was just something I knew I had to do. And fortunately, I'm very lucky to have had a whole career showing and enjoying my passion for wildlife and, of course, conservation.
That's fantastic. Now, you started your lifetime career 1,000 years ago, working with Sir Peter Scott at the Wildfowl and Wetlands, well, at the Wetlands Trust, as it's called then. What was he like?
He was a great guy. I mean, he was Peter to everyone, and so he knew everyone by their Christian names, and he would expected everyone to, call him Peter. And I knew, of course, his family well. I knew Daffler and Falcon, his kids, And, you know, I was deputy curator there for nearly 5 years, from sort of in the early 70s to 75. And Peter would be the sort of guy who would, for example, you'd be in one of the hides overlooking the Dumbles, and he'd come in and he'd just sit with you, and you enjoy, you know, watching the geese, you know, the white front or whatever it might be in the winter months particularly. And then Phil, his wife, would come in and literally haul him out by the scruff of the neck and say, Peter, there's no money in the bank. Come and paint. So he'd nip back to the Rushy Pen, his lovely house there. He'd be painting for a week, and then back in the Dumbles with us, you know, enjoying the wildlife. And when he was knighted, which was a great honour, of course, you know, well deserved, he decided he'd hold a party, you know, for everybody. And so, you know, the day came for the party. We were all sort of waiting for him, looking spick and span in one of the observatories. And, you know, we think, gosh, you know, it's Sir Peter, you know, for God's sake, you know, this is a new era for him and for us. He came in wearing a pink wig and said, right, you know, gotcha. You know, we all thought he was going to be sort of, you know, all posh and smart, but he was actually with royalty, or whether it was with the staff at Slimbridge. So, yeah, great guy. And it was great that years later, after he'd died, Phil Scott came up and opened our birdwatching centre at the Appleton Nature Birding, which of course we'll probably mention and talk about later on. But they're a great family, and I'm still in touch with Daphne. In fact, painted in my room here. Just I don't know if you can actually see this, but oops, no, I cannot do this. We'll probably lose everything. But a great picture of some pink-headed ducks. Yeah, it's. You okay? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can still just about hear you. Yeah.
Okay, fine. Yeah. So I mean, I say the great family, the Scotts. I mean, they were, you know, just so friendly, and I just loved my time at I still call it Wildlife Trust, but it was you know, a really interesting time for me. I learned a lot. I spent a lot of time particularly specialising in rearing endangered waterfowl, a lot of nenays, and in fact, a few years ago, I was invited out to Hawaii to actually see some of the descendants of the geese that I was lucky enough to rear when they were almost, the species was almost extinct, down to about 40 individuals.
Yeah, you talked about nene geese. They are so gentle. I remember feeding some nene geese when I went to Pensthorpe last year, and they just nip you very gently compared to the other geese who are quite heavy-handed, if that's the right phrase to use. But the other thing is, I wished I'd met Sir Peter Scott. I was too young, I suppose, to have met him, but I heard a fantastic story that was told about him by Sir David Attenborough, no less. And the story went along these lines. Basically, back in the day before, in fact, this was, I think, Sir David's first TV extravaganza. He went to Madagascar. But before going, he bumped into Peter Scott, as he wasn't Sir Peter Scott at the time. And Peter said, "Oh, Sir David, what are you up to these days?" And Sir David Attenborough said, "Well, I'm off to Madagascar. I'm shooting a series or a program for the BBC." And Sir Peter Scott said, "Well, when you go there, can you do me a favour? Can you count any Madagascar pochards you see? Because I need some for my collection. I haven't got any." And David Attenborough thought to himself, "What the hell is a Madagascar pochard?" But he said to Sir Peter Scott, "Yeah, no problem, I'll do it." So he goes off to Madagascar, does the filming, comes back, the TV program goes out, and then he bumps into Sir Peter Scott, and he thinks, "Oh no." And Sir Peter Scott comes up and says, "So David, how many Madagascar pochard did you count?" And Sir David Attenborough said, "Well, to be honest, I didn't really see any." And Sir Peter Scott said, "Well, actually, in one scene, you were standing by a lake and there were 40 behind you."
I love it. Actually, it's a great story because you know, one of the things I'm trying to do in my life, having had a lifetime interest in all the ducks, geese, and swans is to see all the world's waterfowl. And so I went to Madagascar many years ago and saw all the, and missed out on the Madagascar pochard, because at that time it was considered to be extinct. And then, of course, about 5 years later, they rediscovered some individual birds on a lake way up in the northwest from memory. And so I have got to go back to Madagascar to see this bird, but it's a very critically endangered species. But they're doing a lot of really good work in Madagascar to get that species back into good numbers and slowly reintroducing them to other lakes where the habitat is suitable. So great story and great bird.
Yeah, I've heard about your...
Yet to get on my list, unfortunately.
Yes, I've heard about your legendary quest to see all the waterfowl in the world, and I remember you telling me that you glimpsed one that is a species that people dream about, really, the pink-eared duck. Can you tell us about that?
Oh, pink-headed duck.
Pink-headed duck,
not pink-eared. Pink-headed duck. Yeah, I mean, this was. I spent 2 months in Burma, which is not the easiest of countries to sort of observe and get around because of all the military problems there and basically the whole logistics. So I went with a great friend, Jonathan Eames, who works for BirdLife International, and we spent, as I say, 1 month initially, and then the second month. And on the second month, on the very second day of the trip, we were on the edge of this amazing lake, huge wetland. And we were just scanning left and right, didn't have the scope, just had binoculars. And suddenly a party of what were mainly spot-billed ducks came up, which had absolutely amazing view. And it came way past us and split off from the other birds and then landed into this huge marsh. Now, it was impossible to get into this marsh. We spent about another 5 days looking for it. So I've got no evidence. All I know is what I saw. I believe that, I saw a pink-headed duck. A pink-headed duck has not been seen since, and even despite further trips to look for it. So who knows? Maybe I was just punch drunk thinking I was going to see this bird, but I'm convinced that pink-headed duck is on my list, and who cares if nobody else thinks that any difference? But it's just an amazing place to be anyway in Burma, and we just hope that things improve, and maybe this bird it still exists. It loves small lakes and some very small lagoons, with very high elephant grass, very difficult to access. Almost the only place where you can get to them is either by elephant, or even then, of course, the last thing you want to do is start charging around, using elephants as a tool to sort of discover this bird. So, who knows? We're amazing duck, and that's why Daphne Scott, Peter's daughter, painted me the ducks, pink-headed ducks, and I'll see if I can get it down off the wall shortly and show you this amazing picture of a pink-headed duck.
Well, I hope that works, Tim. The only problem is you've been frozen on my screen for the last half hour. You haven't moved at all. You just got that smile on your face. But anyway, going back to ducks, okay, you haven't seen Madagascar pochard. What else is left on the list in terms of wildfowl to see?
Well, I finally found my last South American trip to see the Orinoco goose. How I have seen that, I just don't know. But I was at a bird fair in Colombia, heard that a group had been seen on the edge of the Venezuelan border. So in a crazy way, I hired a small plane, little Cessna. Penny and I went out to this remote place, an hour's flight, and as we landed at an unbelievably remote place, we saw about 2,000 Orinoco geese. So that was an extraordinary story, and so that's mopped up South America. I've got one in Africa to see, the Hartlook duck. So I'll crack that one day, perhaps go to Ghana, where they're reasonably easy to see. And then most of the others are sort of weird opportunity to see because, the expense of actually getting there is prohibitive. So, who knows? But it's great fun. It's at least you've got, something to look forward to. And, I'll one day go to my grave with maybe 2 or 3 species still to see. Who knows?
Absolutely. Okay, well, going back to your distinguished career, I mean, you moved to Rutland in 1975 to start the creation of a nature reserve. What nature reserve was that, and where was it?
Well, that nature reserve is Rutland Water Nature Reserve. It was being, at the time, there was no water at all in the huge area that was being built, and it's become Britain's largest reservoir. In fact, the largest man-made water body in the whole of Europe. So at that time, a Water Act had been passed that meant that not just providing a supply of water, but to provide recreational facilities and also conservation. So the job was advertised. I started in about, April 1975. And it's amazing because at the time, the local wildlife trust that I worked for, they had just one part-time admin officer. So I went to the office, collected a map to show me where the reserve was. He said, well, it's somewhere over there towards this small county of Rutland. So there I was, armed with my Ordnance Survey map, and being here, it's an amazing site. It has a huge bird list, and of course it's the most important inland site in Britain for a range of water birds and other species. It's a great site, love it, and we get up. I think the weirdest thing of all at the time was the fact that there was, for 4 years, there was no water anywhere near the reserve. So I spent a lot of trails, building the hides, and of course starting up a volunteer program for volunteer wardens, people to come in and do the sort of different types of work. And all these years later, we built the first ever volunteer training centre on the reserve 5 years ago with a super grant from the lottery. And we now have nearly 600 volunteers on our books. And it's just an incredible place for people for all walks of life. Well, you know what volunteers are like, they're almost 90, because they have this passion and they want to do something, either as a child, as an adult, or as a retirement opportunity to enjoy nature. And of course, the health side of it is brilliant. People just love to get out and do something physical.
That's good. Tell us about, obviously the Rutland Water is very famous for bird fair. We'll get onto that in a second, but can you tell us a little bit more about the reintroduction of the ospreys?
Yeah, basically what happened was, being a large body of water stocked with tens of thousands of fish every year, mainly trout, but there are lots of other species over the years have introduced themselves by water being pumped in from the different ones. And at the same time, the ospreys in Scotland were beginning to increase the populations, and we would get 1 or 2 birds staying in over on migration. 1984, when 2 birds actually over summered. In fact, at the back of my cottage, we have an amazing part of the reservoir with lots of fantastic trees and things like that. So I for the whole of that summer, watched these two birds. Roy Dennis, world expert, good friend, who lives in Scotland, who is the sort of guru of ospreys. And he said, that sounds like a great idea. They probably won't come back, but let's have a think about how we could actually reintroduce, if you can persuade the water company, Angling Water, who I work very closely with, to help provide some resources, maybe there's an opportunity here. So Roy came down, we looked at one or two sites, we built some artificial nests on platforms, and the following year, as he predicted, the birds didn't come back. But in the meantime, we formulated an idea to translocate ospreys from nests in Scotland and bring them to Rutland. Now, of course, you can't just do this without opportunities to look at the proposal, to go to the different licensing bodies. And also, we hadn't any experience. So I went out to Minnesota, to the Twin Cities, where the only translocation project of ospreys anywhere in the world had been held and was highly successful. So spent a couple of weeks there learning techniques, came back, put the proposal together. We got the licenses from both the bodies, and then started bringing osprey chicks down from 1987, and we brought 12 chicks a year for 5 years. After year 3, the first birds started returning, and in 2001, the first chick hatched from a nest literally about 500 meters from my home. So an amazing story. And now, all these years later, more than 170 chicks have been hatched from the project. They're not all obviously at Rutland Water. Many of them are sort of in areas, within, a few hours or a few miles drive. But it's been unbelievably strict, and they're slowly going to cover the rest of Britain. So it's a great story, and of course, thousands of people come to the reserve every year to see one of the main nests. And anyone listening now today, if you're not already familiar, go to ospreys.org.uk, and you'll be able to then go and look at the nest as it is at the moment. There are 4 chicks, all doing really well, and you can monitor the site, with the county on the chicks. It's a great success story, and we've produced books. We've inspired other people around Europe to do similar projects, and again, they're now breeding in Spain, they're breeding in Italy, and other places. So it's a great story.
Yeah, fantastic. Now, there is another great story you told me surrounding the ospreys and a certain Prince Charles.
Well, yes, I mean, we've been very lucky. I mean, if it's the story I think I'm telling you, when he came to see us, you mean?
Yeah.
Which story you?
Well, I'm actually referring to the story. I think.
Yeah, I mean both right. Prince Charles and.
No, it's a story when you received a phone call.
Oh well, no, that was not Prince Charles. This is when I was under the sink, mending a tap, and I had a call from Buckingham Palace to actually from the Master of the Royal Household, and I thought that's very weird. It's someone taking the mick here. So I said, okay, look, leave me a number, I'll phone you back. So anyway, I phoned back about an hour later, and this very posh voice said, hello, not the Queen over there. I've been commanded by the Queen and Prince Philip to invite you to a private lunch. Yes, thank you. You mean this is a genuine call? So anyway, it all ended up, I had the most amazing opportunity, 6 of us having lunch with the Queen and Prince Philip. I sat next to Prince Philip, and we were chatting about various things, and I noticed the Queen was she was great, because all the 2 dogs, 2 corgis and a dachshund came in, and she was surreptitiously feeding them under the table, as people do, you know. And Prince Philip got very cross to get those bloody dogs out of the way, because they were all under the table. But the end of the story was, I said to Prince Philip, look, why don't you come up and see the ospreys? He said, I'd love to come up. I'll come up in October. I said, that's no good. They go in August. And he literally said, okay, fine, we'll reorganise it. And he came up. And since then, Prince Charles has been up as well. He's been on a private visit. So, you know, the royal family have been really very supportive, and you know, it's been great to make you know, personal contact with them.
Good, great story. Well, the main story, I suppose, that surrounds Rutland Water was the inception of the British Birdwatching Fair. So, for those who may not know the full story, can you give us the potted history of how you came up with the idea, or, you know, you, Martin, maybe, I don't know, and how it's sort of evolved to what it is?
Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, basically, I've always, I suppose, been slightly different to the average warden, you know, who just wants to get on, manage the nature reserve. I've got a bit of an entrepreneurial streak somewhere in me, and I'm always looking for opportunities to inspire people, to bring people together. But I'm also very conscious that there's a big industry out there. You know, we all buy binoculars, telescopes, bird food, bird videos, you know, bird books. You've got enough behind you by the looks of it. And so, I don't know about Game Fair, you know, if you're from America. It's basically a huge annual event for the shooting, the fishing, the outdoor industry. And a lot of it was very much the same. And I thought, well, why, if there's a game fair, maybe there's an opportunity to have a bird fair. There's nothing in it, you know, no one ever had thought about this before. So I then contacted a friend of mine, Martin Davies, who then was we met at a pub up in Hambleton, which is my local village, called, right, the Finch's Arms. And basically, we went from there. We contacted Bruce Hanson from In Focus, a great optical retailer, who got a good business head. He kept us on the straight and narrow, and we together, the 3 of us, formulated this idea. But we needed some money, so I contacted a local friend, John Brinkley, who was then the regional manager for Swarovski. And he literally said, right, fantastic idea, here's £2,000, and that set us on the road of bird gathering of people, bird fair in the world. And so, you know, it's just gone from strength to strength. We've raised millions of pounds, literally millions. So we've raised £5.5 million actually on the reserve over those weekends of the bird fair. And then we donate that money to BirdLife International for projects all over the world. We don't put any money back into Britain. I passionately believe that, you know, our money can be spent more sensibly abroad. You know, the pound can buy 10 times more than it can in, say, you know, land in Britain, or whatever the project might be. But the great news is that BirdLife has then used to use it as seed money for bigger grants, and that's brought up another 35 million. So, you know, if any of you are listening today and you've been to Bird Fair, you can be very proud. Pat yourselves on the back, go and get a glass of gin and tonic or whatever it is, glass of wine, and celebrate the fact that Bird Fair has raised £40 million for conservation around the world.
That is staggering. And it's an idea that obviously launched 1,000 ships. Before we carry on, I just wondered if anyone here, any of you Zoomers, had any questions for Tim at this point. And don't be shy.
Yeah,
Okay.
don't be shy.
Looks like they're very happy with what's been said so far. So the vision you had way back when you started,
Yeah.
sorry, can you hear me, Tim?
All I said, are they all hearing clearly?
Good. The vision that you
Yeah,
had
I can
way
hear you.
back when,
Yeah. Yes, I can hear you.
good. The vision that you had way back when, how does that compare to what's happened now in terms of how the bird fair's grown?
Well, I mean, the bird fair is up until fairly recently is very much run on the same format that we've run it for all these years. I mean, personally, I've always tried to build it around relationships with people. You know, I mean, we've got to know each other. Well, I've got to know the likes of Chris Packham and Mike Dilger and Mark Carwadine and Simon King. You know, and they've become friends, and they're great people that support us. And Bill Oddie, you know, these people have built a relationship around the years of different sponsors, of course. I was absolutely critical, you know, and they've become not just sponsors, but you've all become great friends. And I think one of the great things about the bird fair is the fact that you know, people come, you know, not just to spend lots of money. They come to meet each other. They come to make new friends. They come to listen to lectures. They come because they're passionate about the event, but are passionate about wildlife and birds. Not just, I mean, we call it the bird fair. You know, like many of the bird fairs have been inspired by us. You know, they're very much more diverse. And of course, you know, people can learn about mammals, bats, butterflies, plants, frogs, you know, you name it. You know, these sort of opportunities are there, you know, from the different NGOs around the country, the whole range of wildlife. And of course, you know, what the thing that Bird Fair has done, particularly, is being a vehicle platform to launch many new products, you know. And of course, the big thing that has changed dramatically that we saw was that the travel companies who used to produce their brochures at the end of December, early January, now had to completely reorganize themselves to produce their brochures for the following year in time for Bird Fair. So yeah, we've seen some major changes and we've let it grow gradually. You know, the worst thing you can do is try to emulate what Bird Fair has done, and this has been the downfall of one or two bird fairs around the world that thought they could just do what we've done and taken over 31 years to do. So yeah, it's been an unbelievable journey for me, a journey that, you know, I have enjoyed every moment. It's given me the opportunity to go around the world, to lecture, to talk to new bird fairs, see people, and basically just I've loved inspiring people to come and to a bird fair, whether it's in Colombia or Australia or Madagascar. There's been bird fair. I mean, there's hardly any country in the world that hasn't now had a bird fair.
Yeah, I mean, your idea is actually, as I said earlier, has inspired many people. And like you said just now, I've realized that some thought they can actually just copy your format. But the thing is, I think with Bird Fair, it is a unique proposition, which cannot be kind of replicated in Spain or even the US, because number one, there isn't the market there in terms of people to come to visit the bird fair in the first place. And in the case of the States, it's such a vast nation that people who will only come to a particular event within the distance of a tank full of fuel. So, you know, what you had is completely unique. You said you've been to many bird fairs around the world. Have there been any that really inspired you?
Oh yeah, I mean you learn, and we all learn from each other, and I think that's one of the magical things about the bird fairs. As we form relationships with the different organisers, the different NGOs, you know, we're not trying to compete with each other. we're trying to help and inspire. And I think that's one of the key messages that going forward, I want to take to various bird fairs that perhaps, can learn from us, we can learn from them. And I just feel it's very important that we work as one body and not just go off on our own different directions. Because, as you say, I know that, David, you're hoping, you've been really unlucky for the last 2 years. Last year you had the big storm at Walthamstow, and then this year, of course, with lockdown. But I mean, the idea of a London Bird Festival, great idea. There's a new bird festival in Norfolk at Pensor, and they're all going to be slightly different. And as you go abroad and look at, say, the Colombian ones, they're culturally very different. You know what the Brazilian bird fair was like, last year when we were in Sao Paulo. They're all slightly different, a similar theme, but primarily they're to inspire people. And this is what the newer, younger bird fairs, must prioritize themselves. Don't try to, go, I mean, obviously they need sponsors, they need people to spend a little bit of money, but at the same time, it's going out and getting people inspired to look at birds, because then, slowly that builds and that builds and builds and builds. So you then get, a bird fair in Brazil that will be as big as Rutland, maybe in another 10 or 15 years' time.
Got a couple of questions here. One from Amanda. How close did you come to cutting last year's bird fair because of the weather? And by the way, she was very impressed that you all managed to keep it going, and the staff were brilliant.
Yeah, hi Amanda. Yeah, it was interesting, certainly, and it's always very, very difficult because you're hoping not to spend money on lots of roadway. Artificial roadway costs a fortune. For every panel that goes down, that's another sort of £35. It's not going to go to your project. So we were very careful. I worked closely with Joe, our site manager, and yeah, we were very close. But we survived the wettest summer. What was it, about 5-6 years ago? So I knew that we would just survive, and with the help of so many of the volunteers, but also the public. The public were brilliant. They were patient, and I think, David and Amanda, the spirit at last year's bird fair will never be the same again. It was unique. Everyone pulled together, whether it was literally pulling cars out of the mud or pushing buses. I was actually up at 3 o'clock in the morning, pumping water out of the art marquee. Don't tell the artist that, but so it was a mammoth effort by so many people, and as I say, it was great to see so many people still came.
What was your favourite year at Bird Fair?
Oh, for goodness sake. Favourite year? Oh, I don't know. There is a favourite year because, I mean, it was great when Sir David Attenborough came, and, I've known David personally a long time. Big connection between him and my very recently deceased brother, sadly, who died, you probably heard, Mike died just about 5 weeks ago. So, and he had an incredible career as well with the Old Grey Whistle Test and, Live Aid and stuff like that. But of course, he knew Sir David when Sir David was head of BBC Two. And so I got to know David because he's also patron of the Wildlife Trust, Leicestershire and Mutton Wildlife Trust. And so when I invited him up here, I went for a meal with him in Uppingham, our local town, and then drove him across to where we were holding a big lecture. And he's such an amazing, lovely, lovely man that, that year when he came, and he just carried on signing books through to about almost midnight in the theatre where we were holding things. And he never blinked, he never sort of, said, oh, for God's sake, I need to go home. And then, I mean, just to give you an example, he had a chauffeur or taxi driver outside coming to take him home. I said, look, let me give you some fuel, let me give you some money for the fuel. Oh, don't be so daft, he said. and he was that sort of person. He supported us, and he's been a good friend ever since. So that was probably the year. What year it was? I can't remember. Been 31 of those years.
Of course, with the tragic scenario at the moment with the pandemic, a lot of things have been cancelled, and most of our lives have been cancelled, put on hold, or postponed to next year. Obviously, Bird Fair is one of those scenarios, and Leslie here is asking. Apparently, you were considering holding a digital Bird Fair this year. Any word on that?
Yeah, I did, David. To be fair, I'm not. What people may or may not know is that this has been my a big decision's been made this year, that I'm now no longer to be involved in Bird Fair. There are various changes that have happened that have made that impossible for me to continue. I believe that they are holding a virtual Bird Fair, and this will, I don't know how successful it will be. Personally, again, as I said earlier on, I think Bird Fairs are more about meeting people, being out there in the field, and I think whether a virtual Bird Fair is the right thing, or whether we should just actually go out and watch birds, that's up to the individuals and up to the Wildlife Trust, made these decisions to sort of, let us know what's happening.
So what's next for you then, Tim?
Oh, well, who knows, David? I mean, I've got lots of plans, plans that will develop over the next few weeks. And all I can say at this moment in time is that, everyone is going to get very excited about some of the ideas that will come out a bit later on this year, and just watch the space. But under wraps at the moment, but we have got some great plans, and one particular plan that I think the whole world will love. Say no more. Mum's the word.
Well, it's going to be very different not seeing you around, Tim, because as far as I'm concerned, you are Bird Fair. Let me ask another question in the absence of any other questions from our lovely Zoomers out here. What advice do you give to people thinking about setting up a bird fair in their respective countries, or even, like, for example, myself in London or somewhere else in the UK? What advice would you give someone thinking, or people thinking of starting up a bird fair of their own?
Employ me, David.
Say again?
Employ me. No. I mean, basically, you've got to have the passion to do this, and this is what the new regimes don't always have. They just see it as a job. I've been sort of passionate about Bird Fair, from all the years I've been running it, and it's. I think one of the problems that we've had with other bird fairs is that many of them have tried to grow, first of all, too big. They've tried to involve too many people, so you've ended up with too many chiefs and not enough Indians, which is, of course, a problem. I mean, the Scottish Bird Fair, prime example, was great for a number of years, and then more and more people came on board, more and more people wanted their own slice of the cake, if you like, and then suddenly it all just folded. So it's finding the right message, it's finding the right key one or two people to run it. I mean, take the Colombian Bird Fair, Carlos Wagner, a prime person, really enthusiastic. He's got a small team, highly successful bird fair. I know you've been out there as well. Guto in Brazil, again, another great person. Horacio down in Patagonia in Argentina with the Argentinian fair. There's so many people, individuals have taken up the challenge to run the bird fairs. They've got the passion. once you've got that passion and people feel that passion, then they will join you and you'll have the most successful event you can imagine.
Yeah, because I remember the last time we met before, literally the week before it all crashed down with the lockdown and stuff, was at the bird fair in Extremadura in Spain, called FIO, and that was one of the closest I've ever been to the bird fair in Rutland in many ways. Even though it is like a fifth of the size, there was this atmosphere there which was quite interesting, which I've never seen elsewhere in other bird fairs, because you know, I've been like you, I've been to many around the world, and nothing comes close, really, as far as I'm concerned, to the atmosphere you find at in Rutland. Claire Evans has just asked, you know, because you turn up at bird fair, it's all laid on for you. You just show up and it's all there. But what goes on behind the scenes? How long does it take to set up and dismantle bird fair every year?
Okay, well, the bird fair normally is, say it's mid-August, which is an average sort of time. So about mid-July, first of all, the fields that the bird fair is held in are cut for hay around the 14th of July. So we can't do anything before the 14th of July. So after that, the first marquees start going up around about the 20th of July. And the last marquee will be taken down about 2.5 weeks after the bird fair is finished. So it's a massive undertaking by a lot of the very key super volunteers, by the Rutland Water Nature Reserve staff, who basically run the event during the period of starting the introduction of the marquees through to the as I say, clearing up the last bits of rubbish left behind. So it's a good 2.5 months almost of work.
And you just don't think that. You just think, you turn up and you just think it's been knocked up the day before practically, but obviously not. A question from Amanda, which actually goes way back now. And no, not Amanda, sorry, Fran B. How on earth did you go about putting the water in Rutland? I know you didn't do it personally, Tim. Where did it all come from, and how long did it take to fill that massive hole up?
Okay, well, hi, Fran. Yeah, basically, the water company, obviously Agden Water, who owned the site, finished building the dam in about 1977. So at that point, they were ready to start pumping water. Now, it's purely what we call a pumped storage scheme. So the water is pumped from the river's Welland and the river's Nene. Now, I don't know where you live, but the Welland goes near Stamford, and the Welland near Stamford, and the Nene, River Nene, near Peterborough. So there are massive, great tunnels that were dug over the 5 years prior to while the dam was being built. Huge pumping stations. And so they started pumping in 1977, and it reached top water line at the end of 1979. So basically it took 2.5 years to actually fill to capacity. It had been slowly filling, before 77, but there was just a little bit of water there. So, and when they were building the site, they took everything down. They took all the hedgerows, they took all the houses. But having said that, there were only about 14 houses in the whole site. But what they were very clever at doing, they had a lady called Dame Sylvia Crowe, who was the landscape architect, and she had the engineers and to go around and mark exactly where top water line would be, so that when they started removing the hedgerows, they were moved up to that top water line point. So suddenly you have these woodlands and hedgerows suddenly ending at the end of and what people wondering why. Then of course, as the water filled up and then reached the edge of the new hedgerow or the new lake or the new edge of the woods, it all looked as though the site had been there for hundreds of years. Just a very simple but a very clever way of making it all look so natural.
Fantastic. Amanda's asking, where do we find out what you're going to be doing next?
Well, I'm very happy for you to have my email address. You can't get me, sadly, anymore now on my bird fair. That's being closed by the trust. So rutlandappleton@gmail.com. I'm using that as my contact at the moment. But, you know, if anyone wants to get in touch, please do so. rutlandappleton, all one word, @gmail.com.
Yeah, you know, I for one, I'm gutted that you're not going to be involved from now on. I'll say that publicly. I just feel a bit gutted by that. Kabir,
David,
sorry.
I said I'm pretty gutted. I'm pretty gutted as well.
Yeah, I'm sure you are. I'm sure you are. Kabir, who's only 14 years old, by the way, Tim. 15 actually, just turned 15. He's sorry.
Who's 14 years old?
Kabir Cool. He's one of the people here. Right. He's 15 years old. He's 15 years old. He's 15 years old, and he says that you are a huge inspiration, and he's learned so much from you and Bird Fair each year. How has the involvement of young people doing lectures, walks, and other events changed throughout the years at the fair?
Okay. Well, hi, Kabir. I met Kabir last year at the BTO at the Mall, where he received an amazing award. Great guy, and he's a great inspiration for young people. So, you know, I'm following him, and I think he's following me on Twitter. So, basically, yeah, it's changing, and we're doing a lot more for young people. We're trying to get. I mean, obviously, you know, Kabir and, you know, many of his colleagues are the future, and so, you know, we need to keep them on board. We need to keep inspiring them, and that's Bird Fair has had the Careers Day, which is a great thing where people could come and learn about different careers that were available. You know, literally from the sort of thing you do as a TV presenter, through to academia, through to working on nature reserves, to nature writing. You had Stephen Moss on, I think, the day before yesterday on this conversation, and, you know, Stephen was one of the people talking to the young people. We're doing a lot more guided walks. We give the young people free access to the event, and free stands, particularly for AFON and company groups like that. So, no, I mean, I'm very, very keen to keep young people on board. You know, I was a youngster once who was inspired by just being out in the wilds. You know, nature has changed dramatically. The countryside's changed. You know, it's tougher for people, you know, youngsters to get involved. You know, so many more restrictions in life now. Whereas before, you know, I was young, I was just, you could go out into the world without worrying about, you know, who was around the next corner. But Kabir, keep going, mate, and keep in touch. You know, it's great to know that you're here this evening.
Good. Is there anyone else who would like to ask a question? It's amazing how shy people. It's amazing how shy people are on these things.
I can't see any. So, you know.
Okay. The question I want to ask you, I suppose, before we kind of wrap up, you know, you are a very traveled person. You've been around the block, so to speak. Is there anywhere you haven't been? What's on your bucket list in terms of countries?
How long's this interview got? David, yeah, I mean, I have been very lucky to go to a lot of places, but a lot of places I've been to several times. I mean, one of my favorite countries, if not I feel my second home, is Argentina. So I've been there probably 6 or 7 times. So, you know, I'm not chasing to see new birds, apart from ducks, geese and swans. But generally speaking, Penny and I are really keen to go to Japan. So, you know, that's one of our top lists. I was going to Antarctica, but of course, you know, particular cruise company sadly went to the wall, and so I was unable to join them on that. So Antarctica is high on my list. I've never been to, oh, there's so many places. Where do you start? I mean, I'd love to go to, and maybe going to Mongolia later this year. You know, there's so many places I want to see. I'm happy to just go to where you know, the wildlife is, but also where the people are, where I can help inspire people to enjoy wildlife.
Fantastic. What is your favourite bird?
Oh, actually, oh, there's only one. Come on, it's got to be the shoveler, the northern shoveler.
It's funny, I got a friend who's not a birder, and he calls when I mentioned, you know, to him the shoveler, he calls it the chevaler. Which I think is...
Well, I'll tell you what, years ago, I don't know if you can see this, David. Can you see this?
Yeah. Blokes and birds.
Okay, well, as a young person, I don't know if you can make it out at all, but the reason why I said, as I watch a shoveler going round and round in ever decreasing circles, I wonder what life would be like if I had a normal job. So that's what I feel like. You know, I just love them. You know, when you see them going round and round and round and round, never seem to be getting anywhere. And you know, I often feel a bit like that for us, particularly at the moment with the pandemic. But hey, we're all getting stronger. We're all going to come out of this as better people. Nature, hopefully, is now taking, you know, so much more interest by people. You know, people realise that, you know, we've got a cleaner climate we're living in. You know, I think a lot more people are going to be working from home, so there'll be less cars on the, you know, on the roads. There'll be less people crowding into tube stations. You know, and they can enjoy the countryside at home. So I think it's, you know, there's got to be some positive things that come out of this pandemic.
I just hope the human race will learn from this. History dictates not, but let's hope that this is a change. What's your favourite mammal?
Well, one of the mammals I've never been, and never seen, of course, is a jaguar. You know, I've seen a lot of the other big cats. So I think probably the jaguar is one I'm really keen. You know, I just love the environment they live in. I love, you know, I want to get to Brazil. I want to go to the Pantanal. But at the same time, I don't want to sort of go and, you know, I mean, I was watching tigers. I mean, I've been seeing tigers a few times, but I went to Barrackpore a couple of years ago, and you know, I remember the very first time I went with one of my, what I call my boys' trips, and you know, we almost had the place to ourselves. Now at Barrackpore, there are 300 trucks available to go in. They allow about 100 a day, but they always let a few more in. And I remember at one point we came up to this poor old tiger, and there were 21 vehicles surrounding it, all trying to get a bit closer. And I understand that it's going a little bit like that with the jaguars. And so, you know, I'd rather not see one, even though I desperately would like to see one. But if it means the poor animal's going to get harassed and you know, disturbed doing its sort of normal, natural cycle of life.
And finally, in this trilogy of questions, if you could be anywhere in this world, notwithstanding the current pandemic, where would you be right now? I think you may have answered it already, but where would you be right now?
Well, I think I probably would be back in Markachita. This was one of our probably most fantastic projects we've supported at Bird Fair. We've been out there a couple of times. Penny came out there, Mike Dilger came out with me. Markachita is the most amazing lake, salt lake, the 5th biggest salt lake in the world, the largest salt lake in South America. And as a result of us working with Aves Argentina, which I'm an honorary life member, working with the local communities and the national parks, we hope that later this year, with the Bird Fair money that was pushed into creating not the infrastructure exactly, but the financial input to try to get bird life in Argentina together to work with the communities. And potentially later this year, Marquechita will be the largest, or created the largest national park in Argentina. And it's an incredible site. It has tens of thousands of flamingos, all three species, many of them, both species breeding. It's a stopover point for millions of waders. You can get 600,000 Wilson's phalaropes there, for example, at different times of the year. So it's a phenomenal site. And we've been working with the local communities. There's 13 major communities around the area. They can see the benefit for ecotourism, and of course, with the ecotourism, you get the security of the site. But now with the national park status coming very soon, I think it's probably one of the greatest things that Bird Fair has ever done and ever been involved in. So I'd love to be back there. We've made some very good friends in the area. And who knows, as the lockdown releases, more and more people have the opportunity to learn about places like Marquechita, but many of the other projects. We've supported over 30 different global projects around the world. We've had a phenomenal success, and I hope that success will continue as the new regimes come in.
Well, let's hope so. Now, this is the point in the evening where we actually come to a close. Just to explain what happens next, I'm going to say goodbye and thank Tim for being here. And then we're going to have a bit of an after show party where we go into gallery view and hopefully everyone comes out of their shell. Maybe you've had a couple of drinks and maybe you can start asking questions now quickly for the next 10 minutes after this. But before that, I just want to say thank you very much, Tim, for sparing your time. You could have been out walking around the reserve now. I personally commend you.
Wine. I could have been out drinking wine.
I think that, the work you've done over, was it 32 years now at the Bird Fair? 32 years?
Yeah, 32 years of Bird Fair.
Yeah.
44 years on the reserve.
Well, the work you've done, particularly on Bird Fair, has, I know for a fact, because it's affected me, it's changed people's lives for the better. And, I congratulate you and commend you for all the work you've done for not only setting up Bird Fair, but for influencing others all around the world. And that influence, I'm sure, will continue in the years to come. As far as I'm concerned, you're a legend. So thank you for coming, Tim. I really appreciate that. All I will say now is keep looking up, stay safe,